727s are much too noisy and they use far too much fuel. But as Len Novak reports, there'll be a tear in more than one eye as the last of Australia's first domestic jets is towed away.
It was called the Whispering Jet, and it revolutionised air travel in Australia.
It's the quietest jet in the world. The TAA Boeing jet.
The Boeing 727 was the flagship jet airliner for both Australian and Ansett. For nearly 30 years, the three-engine jet has been a familiar sight in our skies.
It's a new jet age experience in the TAA 727. And only TAA has Whispering Jet, the quietest cabin in the sky.
In the 1960s, it was the best available technology. Its unique T-tail and rear-mounted engines were a departure from conventional design, allowing cabin noise to be kept to a minimum.
T-Jet has the quietest cabin in the sky.
In the air, it's TAA for the perfect combination of finest equipment and finest service.
In the 1950s and early 60s, the Lockheed Electra was the mainstay of Ansett and Trans-Australian Airlines, as Australian was then known.
With the finest equipment, TAA provides Australia's fastest flights.
With about 80 passengers, a Melbourne-Sydney trip took almost 2 hours. They were reliable workhorses, but noisy, slow, and comparatively small.
TAA's combination of finest equipment and service is the right combination for jet age travel.
Little wonder then the 727, affectionately known in aviation circles as the three-holer, caused a sensation when introduced in 1964.
It was a 100 to 110-seater aeroplane. It improved schedules by something like 25%. It was quiet. It flew at a higher altitude. I've forgotten all the things we used at that time from the passenger point of view, but it was, and its reliability factor was very high.
It was a new age. It was like we'd grown up, and we could start to offer different kinds of services because their aircraft were more sophisticated.
We'll get you where you want to go and give you extra care up in the air.
With growth in air traffic, bigger stretched versions of the 727 were introduced in the early 1970s by both Ansett and Australian, carrying about 135 passengers. For Australians pilots, the plane represented one of the ultimate experiences in aviation and is remembered with affection.
The actual handling characteristics of the aircraft are very good. It's a very stable platform to fly. It's nice to land. It's just a good, comfortable airplane.
But these aircraft are the product of 1950s technology. In simple terms, they're not as efficient as the new generation jets.
The 737 burns approximately 40% less fuel than the 727-200, which it replaces. But if we look at the complete life cycle of the 727 from the 727-100 introduced in 1964, we see quite an amazing change. The 737-400 takes off at approximately 4,500 kilograms less in takeoff weight. It burns 2/3 of the fuel of the early model 727s and yet carries 40% more passengers.
The 727 has an unblemished safety history in Australia. It served longer than any aircraft used previously on major domestic routes. It's an impressive aviation record that will probably never be repeated.
737, if we go back to 1964, is a pretty old aeroplane. Very reliable one, however. It's built like a tank, I think.
VHTBQ is towed into the hangar for mothballing. After more than 36,000 hours in the air, it's far from worn out and may yet serve an overseas buyer in countries that don't have Australia's noise standards. There will be many more Australian aeronautical firsts, but there can be only one first domestic jet.
Oh yes, so farewell to the old whispering jet. Glenn Novak reporting, and our thanks to Australian Airlines for their help in making that story.